then being able to support them through that journey. It's amazing.
Mm-hmm. I think we're going to go live soon now. I think,
Sure.
yeah, actually, we're live now. So,
Yes.
Lina, thank you so much for being here. Um, for
Thank
the
you.
for the audience, could you tell us about the vision and mission of BrainSight AI, and could you provide us with an overview of what you guys are doing and what you're building right now?
Sure. So, BrainSight AI is essentially on a mission to change how neuropsychiatric disorders are diagnosed and the prognosis of it, really. And what we are building are two different products which work very well together. One is an MRI based diagnostic platform. So, till today, strangely, in psychiatric disorders, you don't really look at the organ that might be involved in the whole process. So, a
Mm,
cardiologist does look at the heart, other doctors look at different parts of the body, but when it comes to psychiatrists, it has mostly been symptom based. And the brain was not really a big part of the investigation. And that's because till today, there were no markers really or imaging measures that could be used which would direct the investigation of the psychiatrist. What we are able to do is look at brain activity and connectivity patterns in the brain, which are a marker of certain disorders. And this is based on Dr. Rimchim Agarwal, my co-founder's PhD at the National Institute of Mental Health and Neurosciences, where she was looking at neuroimaging markers, like the ones I told you, for schizophrenia specifically. And she recently had a paper published in Nature, which was about being able to look at schizophrenia with just neuroimaging at 87% accuracy, which is a very high accuracy considering how symptom-based diagnosis can actually be very hazy sometimes.
mm, mm,
So that's the first product, yeah.
mm. I mean, and do you have any stats on how many people suffer from psychotic disorders like schizophrenia in India or globally?
So 43 million is probably the number in India. And what you have across the world, for schizophrenia especially, the incidence rate is fairly invariant. So it's mostly in the 1% to 2% of the population across
Mm,
countries.
mm,
But also that our work is not just limited to schizophrenia. So the brain activity and connectivity patterns work that we do is also an early indicator of Alzheimer's. It's also, there are lots of work around being able to help in neurostimulation of depression. So being able to figure out which part of your brain needs to be stimulated so that your at-home neurostimulation can be more effective. All of these use cases are opened up through the use of functional activity and connectivity. So it's
mm.
really the broad spectrum of neuropsychiatric disorders. And honestly, 30% of the population at some point of time would be going through a mental disorder, is what the statistic says.
Mm. I mean, could you talk a little bit more in depth about the product or your initial methods of assessing psychiatric disorders like schizophrenia?
So essentially, we have our product is a MRI based SaaS platform. So what it allows a radiologist, so a neurologist or a psychiatrist sends a patient for a radiology scan, a fMRI scan to be precise. The radiologist just has to upload that scan to our servers. And within a day, we are able to extract the activity and connectivity patterns and provide them with a report which says that this person's activity and connectivity most likely matches that of schizophrenia, or they have very little portion of bipolar, etc. So
Mm,
this is so if you look at how it happens right now, usually when you're focusing only on symptoms, right, it takes almost 3 months of constant back and forth with the doctor to come to a very strong diagnosis of what the person's going through. What we are able to do is reduce that investigation time to just a single day.
mm. That's really interesting. And why are I remember watching your EF pitch. You mentioned that symptoms don't. I mean, tracking symptoms, something along the lines of symptoms not being a great way to diagnose or assess psychiatric disorders like schizophrenia. Could you tell the audience as to why that's the
Sure.
case?
So, in fact, So symptoms is like your fever, your psychosis. So in other disorders, symptoms would be like you have a fever and you're basically saying that this person's either having COVID or something else or something else. Like it's that level of uncertainty that you're mapping the symptoms back to the diagnosis. Now in psychiatry, that's more difficult because of the problems of comorbidity, the problems of spectrum, and the problems um, of of scale. And let me explain that a little bit. When if you're only looking at symptoms, some people, two people with the same symptoms, can often have very different underlying disorders. Now, if you're going to only focus on symptom-based analysis, you're basically not doing a deeper investigation of what that person has. The second thing is of spectrum. So the DSM, the ICD, all of them are very great bodies of knowledge, which are more of elimination. It's like almost like a flow chart which says that if the person's showing these kind of things, you can eliminate this, and you finally come to the final diagnosis. What that means is if a person is showing, let's say, 80% of the symptoms and they make a cutoff, that's when they get a diagnosis. But if they don't make the cutoff, they are not getting that diagnosis. And what is happening is there are very important similarities between people who have made the cutoff and who've not made the cutoff. And you need to be able to take those similarities into account so that you're treating people better. And none of this is really possible through your symptom based diagnosis alone. There was structural MRI, which is like a photo of your brain, which over the past few decades was supposed to advance the field. But structural MRI is it's like a photo of your brain. It can only tell you about structural losses in your brain. It can't tell you about the activity and connectivity patterns in your brain, which could be possibly the only indicator. And that's why the kind of work that we do, the functional MRI, is what we believe will advance the field even further.
That's incredible. I mean, because it's sometimes symptoms may not map to the condition, and so at best you're kind of making a guess. And also, the questionnaires and all of these symptoms. I mean, alongside the symptoms, you have questionnaires, and that requires opinion and recall as well from the patient,
Yes.
which isn't
Yes.
always accurate. That's really interesting. I mean, I want to progress on BrainSight AI, but I just want to talk a little bit more about your background. I mean, obviously, I went through your LinkedIn profile. I mean, you've got a really interesting background. I mean, could you tell the audience about your
Sure.
story up until now?
Sure, absolutely. So I was a software engineer. Like most people in India, we go for our engineering and we we do. And I became a software engineer, and I was doing some cutting edge stuff there. Also, I was working on operating system design at for Cisco and NetApp. And following which, I decided that I wanted to explore a little bit. I actually took a year off, a gap year, and went across India and was traveling to some of the remotest places and staying there for months together, just to kind of get a sense of what are the real life problems which possibly I should be spending my time on um, rather than just focusing on software. And that's when I decided I really want to work on policy issues. And I did a lot of healthcare policy work, working with the government on the national vaccines logistics plan, working on maternal mortality issues in some of the worst hit states in India, and so really kind of focusing on the very intense public health issues that India faces. Um, but I also wanted to kind of make sure that I was thinking about this in the right direction, and which is why I went for my MBA in the Indian School of Business in 2014. And the idea was to kind of put all of these together and work on building my own company. And that's how I reached EF, where I was like, I need to find a co-founder with complementary skills, and then we can form a company together. And that's where I met the wonderful Dr. Imjim, who's on the panel, who's somewhere in the audience right now. And
Yeah.
as I said, she's doing some really cutting edge work at NIMHANS. And I think we both really resonated on the fact that this work can make a lot of difference to people's lives, and hence decided to work together.
Yeah, I mean, did this idea come to you as you were going into EF, or is it something that you come across as you were meeting other people and networking with other people? How did the idea come about?
So EF, I think I came to EF with a very different set of ideas that I wanted to work on, and it was more in the space of health and in the space of sustainability. As I said, impact uh, is a very big theme in my life, really.
Mm.
But nothing of this sort. And I think what EF does allow you is to kind of put all these 50 people in the room, and you get to talk things that you probably wouldn't have talked. So I was talking to somebody about quantum engineering, and I was talking to somebody about homomorphic encryption, and I was like, wow, these guys are doing amazing stuff. And so the idea came through these conversations rather than anything that I had come in with before.
That's incredible.
It is. You should. I mean, like, you should. The vibe of those 50 people talking about homomorphic encryption and GANs and I don't know what not is amazing.
That's incredible. And now and now you're running a company that's trying to, almost map a universal pattern of psychiatric disorders. That's incredible. In terms of I mean, I don't know what regulation in the health tech sector looks like in India. I mean, well, what's the regulatory pathway for BrainSight AI before you guys can begin to commercialize to a mass market? Do you guys have to do clinical trials? What do you have to prove?
Yes.
Could you go into that?
So we need to do clinical studies. So MRI as a methodology is already available. What we're
Mm,
doing is analysis on top of it, and we obviously need to show that this analysis actually makes a difference to the doctor's way of practicing, and that it's highly accurate and has high sensitivity and specificity. So, in terms of our regulatory pathway, there are a number of different regulations that we need to kind of follow. One is in terms of the clinical studies itself, and we have a clinical study on early diagnosis of dementia already going on with one of the big private hospital chains in India.
mm,
And we will be doing such clinical studies for each of the use cases that can be opened up through fMRI. Apart from this, then there is the entire regulatory piece around cybersecurity, HIPAA, and etc., which we are already working with consultants on to
mm,
ensure that our SaaS platform is industrial grade. And the last piece is really about the FDA being able to actually go through the FDA process to show that our products don't pose a risk to patients or to doctors. And here we will need to go through the FDA fast track process for AI algorithms, which essentially because fMRI is a very new technology, so you can't really do a prospective study, and so we need to do concurrent studies as we are kind of getting the data. We need to, in parallel, show that our data governance processes are very strong. And that
mm.
is what the fast track process really focuses on. And that's what we are working with consultants to take it through.
That's interesting. I mean, in terms of your data, I mean, is it time series data, or are you guys analyzing static images over a period of time? I think it's five
It's a
minutes, right?
it's a time series data. So it's
Oh,
five,
wow.
7 to 10 minutes. Yeah.
Wow,
So
that's much more difficult
yeah,
to
it's four
label.
dimensional data. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really difficult to label time series data, isn't it?
It is. It is. So, what we do is because this kind of labeling of nobody can really read an fMRI 4D data and label like this is the disease pathway and this is the disease signal. So, what we focus on is to get the corresponding scales from doctors and neurologists. Like, for example, if it's dementia that we're looking at, then looking at clinical dementia scores. If it's schizophrenia, we are looking at the in the beginning stages, looking at the label that a doctor gives, and then at later stages, being able to kind of map that across three doctors, our analysis is fairly similar. So that's how we are looking at the labeling part of the work.
That's incredible. I mean, in a uber optimistic world, say 12 to 18 months from now, I mean, what colorative insights do you hope to gather about the neurochemistry of the brain and psychiatric disorders? I mean, what do you hope to be able to conclude or provide insights on?
So I would actually go disorder specific because there is
Okay.
like each disorder almost has a different set of things that we need to be looking at.
Mm,
So for schizophrenia, being able to actually capture the disease signal and show that this is indeed indicative of schizophrenia, is we've already done that to a high accuracy now. Now being able to kind of show that on real world data across hospitals is what we hope to do.
Mm-hmm.
Similarly, for dementia, what we are trying to do is showing that fMRI can indeed be a great way to do early diagnosis at very early stages of dementia, much earlier than when the patient shows cognitive decline. So it's very disorder specific as to how what are the insights that we hope to give to doctors and patients.
That's incredible. So, hopefully, eventually, you guys can come up with like a universal signature or like a neurochemistry pattern that's associated with a specific disease.
Yes, in
Or
fact, it's great that you brought that up, Chetan. So, in
okay.
fact, what we are hoping to do with our MRI SaaS platform and the app that we are creating, the app is essentially looking at digital phenotypes to be able to capture things like sleep patterns, anxiety patterns, etc. All of this data together, running unsupervised learning on it to be able to come to biotypes and being able to say that, within schizophrenia, there are three different biotypes, or within some other disorders, there are different biotypes which correspond which correspond to more pathological things than symptoms alone, would
Mm.
probably be something that will be very useful for new treatments and therapies. So that's what we hope to do, but that's a little longer, not
Yeah,
now. Yeah.
I can imagine.
So
What are you guys up to now? I mean, where are you guys from a product standpoint, a company standpoint?
yes. So in terms of our product itself, so we've automated the entire. So in terms of the MRI part, I'll talk about there are two parts to it. There's one part which is your pre-processing, which is really extracting the signal. So we've automated that entire part so that we can give it to doctors and they can work with it and play around with it. In terms of the analysis that we do on top of it, the AI and the 3D simulation analysis that we need to do, that we are working on a case by case with hospital, as I said, with the clinical studies that we do. In terms of the app itself, we've already released a beta version, and hopefully in 2 months is what we are looking to launch it officially. And so these two things will go on in parallel as we go along.
That's amazing. That's amazing. And in terms of also where you guys are right now, I mean, are you guys hiring? Are you guys looking to fundraise in the next couple of months?
We are looking to fundraise. In fact, so we are actually talking to investors right now to raise a round of funding. In
Mm-hmm.
terms of hiring, we have a brilliant team of 8 people right now. But yes, we need more. The kind of work that we're doing requires a lot more people. So as and when we raise a round of funding, we will be expanding our team. At the same time, we've also been selected by we are one of the 4 worldwide companies selected by the Source Systems for through this. So we are being accelerated by them through the 3D experience program for the next 2 years. So they will be providing us a lot of marketing and sales support as well. So there's a lot of ground that will be covered there in terms of the talent that we need.
Yeah, that's incredible.
Yes.
I mean, what you're hoping the next round of funding can enable you guys to do going forward?
So a couple of different things. One is being uh, essentially this is high performance computing that we are providing to hospitals, right? Like being
Yeah.
able to do this 4D analysis and providing it to hospital for specific uses. As of now, we are working with the resources that we have to be
Mm.
able to kind of put all of this together. And we've done a good job of it. The team's been working very hard on it. Now we need to be able to get much more resources in terms of the kind of, even the physical infrastructure, et cetera, that we need to build this into an industrial grade product. So that's one part of it. The second part of it is the clinical studies itself. So being able to we've been applying to grants to be able to show these clinical studies that it works. I think that will become much faster if we are able to raise a round of funding. So yeah, these are and the third thing is we really want to be expanding to the US and UK. And so to be able to build a small team in the US is the next big thing that we want to do. So these are the three big things.
Is there, I mean, you don't have to say it, but is there a range you're looking to raise within?
So we're looking at raising around $1.5 to $2 million right now. So US
Yeah.
dollars.
Amazing. And finally, I mean, as we wrap up the interview, you've been on this journey for what, about a year? Was it 6 months?
Yeah, a year now.
Yeah. I mean, have there been any like hard lessons or humbling lessons that
A
that,
lot.
but what were the most impactful, hard and humbling lessons, on your journey over the last year?
I think COVID was the most humbling of the lot, really. We had never planned for it in the sense that it could actually put a spanner in a lot of work is something that we had absolutely not planned. And like really figuring out how to do with less resources and to still kind of build towards the big vision has been extremely humbling for
Mm,
both Rimjim and me, really kind of figuring out our way around that. But I
mm,
think some of the other things around I think building a great team. I'm very fortunate that we have a great team, and so really making sure that even while you're working remotely, that you are able to capture that vibe on a regular basis. Those are things that we've had to learn as we go along, and I think now we've got it, but it took some amount of learning. So these are some of the bigger ones that I remember. There are on a daily basis. I think entrepreneurship is very humbling in general.
Oh, Lana, this has been a great conversation. I really appreciate you jumping on this morning. We'll wrap it up for now, but is there anything else you'd like to tell the audience? Anything that you're advertising? Anything else?
Not really. We would love for you to actually go to our website and to check out the two products that we are building and give us feedback. Our marketing lead here will be very, very excited if you actually go and give us a lot of feedback. So that's one thing. And I think thank you, Chetan, so much for your time today. It's been incredible talking to you and just talking about our journey. So thank you
Yeah.
for creating the space.
Amazing. Take care.
Thank you. Take care. Bye bye.